Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about the recent developments and very significant updates and reports when it comes to the ceasefire, especially coming from Israel. It appears to be that Israel and the Israeli media are preparing the public opinion for great concessions coming from the Israeli side when it comes to the ceasefire. Many things that were considered to be red lines for Israel, such as full withdrawal or full ending of the war, or the releasing of many heavy sentence prisoners from the Israeli prisons, including all, in effect, the details and demands of the Palestinian resistance when it comes to the ceasefire. A lot to talk about when it comes to the ceasefire, and I also wanted to share with you more different tones coming from the United States and more warnings, think tanks talking about the need to start killing Turks inside of Syria due to the growing rift between the US forces inside of Syria and Turkish forces as well, and the Israeli aggression expanding inside of Syria and where things are likely to go when it comes to the Syrian front. I'm going to start off with the ceasefire. So there was a lot of talk, of course, about advanced stages of negotiations when it comes to the ceasefire in recent weeks. I've been sharing these reports with you, but again, not much has been released, and these things don't usually get released to make the prospect of a successful ceasefire more realistic. Usually when more details are released, there's more scrutiny, there's more criticism, and there's more people talking, therefore leading to more pressure on the sides that are negotiating, and in this case primarily the Israeli side. Because one thing needs to be understood very clearly: the fact that the Palestinian resistance led by Hamas have not submitted to the Israeli will and did not go back on any of their core principles when it comes to the negotiations is why it was delayed for so long. They were having all sorts of proposals when it comes to 2 or 3 day ceasefires where Israel can go back and kill as many Palestinians as they want without any reassurances for the future, without any guarantees. It would be an open case with a repeat of the temporary ceasefire that happened previously, where Israel had a temporary ceasefire only to reignite the war and kill even more Palestinians and destroy even more territories and houses and cause more havoc in their genocide and infanticide inside of Gaza. And of course, the Palestinians don't want that. And although it has been at a very high cost, the Palestinian resistance did not submit. But that means that one side has to submit, and that side, according to these reports that are coming from Israel, is the Israeli side, although they're trying to whitewash or sugarcoat these concessions with different terminologies when it comes to agreeing to that ceasefire. So firstly, there were a couple of reports saying that Benjamin Netanyahu himself was in Cairo to talk about the ceasefire, but later we had denial. No, he was not in Cairo. Benjamin Netanyahu was not in Cairo. He was actually doing other important stuff. But then the reports started to come out about the actual ceasefire and the fact that US officials are now saying there will be a deal. There's no more hopefulness. There's no more positivity. There are people confirming that there will be a deal. And of course, so long as we didn't have a declaration, we don't see anything, no one can conclude that there will be a ceasefire. But based on the reports that are coming from the Israeli side, from the mediators, from the US, and from Hamas as well, it looks like we're getting there slowly but surely. So we had this report here speaking about still there are a bit of gaps in the negotiations, according to officials, and then a senior American official saying there will be a deal. Now, this is a long article here in one of the Israeli newspaper websites where they describe the talks about the ceasefire. All of the details, all of the things that Israel would be giving, and the length of the ceasefire. And from the details that we're understanding, from what they described in this article here, they are initially mentioning the the Israeli media is mentioning an initial 7-week phase where there will be a temporary ceasefire in what appears to be the first phase of the ceasefire, during which Israel will be withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor next to the Egyptian borders. That will include the release of a small number of Israeli females who are held in Gaza. They could be both dead and alive because Israel killed many of them, in return for hundreds, most likely, of Palestinians being released from Palestinian prisons. There's a lot of, shadiness and fog when it comes to the details of, for example, people going back to the north in the first phase, or if Israel will withdraw completely in the first phase. But there is a confirmation that Israel will eventually be withdrawing from all of the territories. And the way they're saying it in this article is that Israel will be present in the border areas in the north and the east, meaning they will not be present in the south at all. So we're talking about a complete withdrawal, and they will be present near the borders. And when we talk about near the borders, that could easily mean the Israeli side, not in Gaza, and that is most likely what's going to happen. Now, a key thing here was, well, this Netzarim line here, the Netzarim territory that Israel was expanding more and more inside of Gaza and inviting even settlement leaders to talk about future settlements inside of Gaza. This article also confirms that Israel will eventually, in those later stages, will be withdrawing from the Netzarim line as well. And they're also talking about Hamas insisting on the people going back to the north. These are things that Israel tried to insist on, but clearly Hamas did not give in. And this is making everyone prepared that Israel will be eventually withdrawing from also Netzarim and the northern parts, anywhere they are established in the northern part of Gaza, that the siege will be lifted. This is something very important. It's not that only aid will be going back in. No, the siege will be lifted off Gaza. That means things will be open completely. And again, that's according to the report. But the term, lifting the siege off Gaza, well, previously, before the war started, 500 trucks of aid were going into Gaza, but it was still considered to be a besieged entity. What do they mean by lifting the siege? Is there going to be some sort of a declaration of some sort? Because the most interesting part that was mentioned in this article is the day after. They're talking about the crossings, who will manage the crossings, and they're saying that it would be the Palestinian side managing the crossings, not Israel. Well, from the Rafah crossing, including potentially EU. So Egypt, Palestine, EU, no Israel involved. That's something new because Israel was previously involved in what happened in the Rafah crossing. There was a trilateral agreement between Israel, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority. Now, according to this report, Israel will be out of the picture. Everything is worse for Israel when it comes to this agreement. But the most interesting part here is there was always talk about the day after inside of Gaza, and Hamas need to be eliminated. We're going to get to that in a sec, the massive Israeli failure and all of that. We need to eliminate Hamas the day after. They won't be there, making sure Gaza does never poses a threat, and they should never be present militarily nor politically. All of that is out of the way because Hamas are still there, and Hamas will be present after. How? When it comes to the day after, the identity of the administrator of the Gaza Strip will be agreed upon at the end of the war, after the deal, according to the report. After the deal, that means after they finish everything and the war is ended. That means the decision is in Palestinian hands and Israel has no say when it comes to that, which also indicates that Hamas will be remaining there politically and militarily, which is a massive blow for Israel. Again, all of these things are indicating that Israel is submitting to the Palestinian demands. They are kneeling down. That's it. Israel is giving up. They know what's going to happen. They're no longer able to continue when it comes to Gaza. Why? Well, because despite all of their destruction and genocide, that's it. The Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian people have been persistent. The Palestinian resistance still hitting them really hard in Jabalia. In the past 3 days, there were ambushes from the Palestinian resistance in North Gaza. Dozens of Israelis were killed and wounded. And you're talking about an area that has been completely leveled. There is almost no standing building in Jabalia. What Israel is committing under the world's eyes, everyone, is the worst crime of the 21st century. 18,000 children at least, over 45,000 people killed, all of them. Infanticide, genocide, mass destruction, barbarism, sadism. Israel showed a high level of sadism and still does when it comes to Gaza. And they have shown the whole world how depraved they are as a state, as a nation, as an army. The levels of immorality and depravity beyond any comprehension. And scenes are coming out from Gaza every single day to confirm all of that. Again, with support of some countries and under the watch of everyone who couldn't stop what's happening. But now, at least we have these reports indicating that we're close to something when it comes to the ceasefire. But that's not only coming from Gaza. That's coming because there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture, and clearly Saudi Arabia is in this picture. So we also had a report here in the Jerusalem Post that Saudi Arabia, Israel peace will happen if Gaza war ends, sources tell Post. This is an advanced position now, or a modified position, when it comes to Saudi Arabia, who previously stated that there will be no deal unless there's a Palestinian state. So one thing would be wrong if this report is accurate. Either it's, well, they're lying, it's not just Gaza war ends, eventually we will see some sort of a Palestinian state, according to the withdrawal agreement that's happening in Gaza. Based on the previous report, Israel will have no say when it comes to Gaza. So is something similar going to happen with the West Bank? We're not sure yet. So are we going to have a Palestinian state? And here they're saying that, oh, no, it's just the war. Or indeed, the Saudi government, they changed their position. They're no longer saying we want a Palestinian state and that's a condition to have peace with Israel. It's only the war ending. That would be against their official policy so far, because many of their leaders, they said time after time in the past year that there will be no peace with Israel so long as there is no Palestinian state. And that's something very significant. However, clearly, there is something bigger than just simply the ceasefire talks between the Palestinian side and the Israeli side. And also, of course, the positivity came from Hamas as well. Hamas said there's positive talks in Doha. Agreement with Israel is possible if it stops setting new conditions, according to a statement by the movement. Things are hopeful and there might be a ceasefire. They're criticizing Israel because they're setting conditions, and that's typical for Israel. They usually try and add conditions towards the end of the talks to try and extract as much as possible from the other side when it comes to the ceasefire. But Hamas, they have experience when it comes to negotiations, and they previously led successful negotiations and got what they wanted from Israel, particularly after the 2014 war on Gaza. So positive talk, and also indications that Hamas delegations and Israeli delegations will be present at the same time in Cairo, where the mediators would be having to go from room to room to close all of the details of the deal. And again, that's the final stage of the talks, really, when you have the delegations of the two main parties that are involved, present, and the mediators going between one place to another. That says that, well, that's it, we're just sealing the deal here, and after that it's only about publishing that deal. And all of that, if it does get implemented, will be great news for the Palestinian people, primarily, who have been going through the worst genocide in the 21st century. And it would also mean that Israel failed strategically, that it hasn't achieved its primary objectives of the war when it comes to eliminating Hamas and making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat again. Whether they will achieve the third aim or objective of the war, which is returning all of their prisoners from Gaza, that's something that they would need to finalize, as in finish the whole agreement up until they get that objective. So we need to be in phase 3, and phase 3 would need to almost end completely up until they get the other prisoners. And again, they would need to be paying a heavy price when it comes to prisoners, because the previous report about the prisoners who would be released from the Palestinian side did not deny that senior figures from the Palestinian side would be released, like Marwan Barghouthi and Ahmad Saadat. The report said that Israel was insisting that they are sent outside of Palestine. They don't want them to return to the West Bank and Gaza. And they also said that the number of Palestinian prisoners we will be releasing in later knocks will be inconceivable. It will be hard to digest. So we're potentially talking about the biggest prisoner exchange in the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So that's when it comes to the ceasefire talks, and more positivity. And again, we hope that at the end of the day we do reach a ceasefire, because the people need the relief. And again, the struggle will always continue up until the justice and equality is received, is implemented when it comes to the Palestinian people. And these things usually don't come unless you fight for them and continuously fight for them. Now, when it comes to the region, it's not only Gaza. Israel is expanding. They're withdrawing gradually from Lebanon, but they're expanding in Syria. They're warning other countries through, and they're threatening and. And many people, unfortunately, are exaggerating what Israel is doing, and in many ways working as, well, serving Israel in many cases by having this scare campaign. Israel is occupying Syrian territories. Israel is expanding in Syria. Israel occupied all of Gaza in the past 14 months. Israel occupied massive parts of South Lebanon in the past 4 months, and Israel will be withdrawing from these areas. And likewise in Syria, they will be withdrawing, whether when it comes to a political deal at some point, or armed struggle to expel Israel from Syria. And this is what people need to understand now. When it comes to the statements coming from Israel, they're way more dramatic than what they are on the ground. But their biggest battle with Syria now is with Turkey. Why? Because Turkey is the biggest player in Syria now. When it comes to after the Syrian people, well, Turkey has been the biggest side benefiting from what's happening in Syria. And that puts them at odds with one of their main allies, the United States, a NATO member. And could they actually have a conflict with the United States and NATO? Many people will also question that. Of course they can, because many other NATO members will have internal conflicts between them. Being a member of an organization does not eliminate the probability and possibility of you having a conflict with them. And this is not only something that is a possibility. Think tanks in the United States are preparing or trying to prepare the public opinion for escalation when it comes to Syria. So there has been a an article actually published by the Middle East Forum Observer, think tank in the United States, by a man called Michael Rubin, saying the United States needs to prepare to kill Turks inside of Syria. Turkey's actions already cross the Rubicon and place American forces and interests in jeopardy. Now, for people to understand, when it comes to Syria, well, the northeastern part has 30 US bases. US bases present there under the excuse of fighting ISIS. And fighting side by side with the Syrian Democratic Forces. And of course, the main thing behind this is the oil fields. You know, they will create and position ISIS where there are certain interests so that they can control the oil fields. That's something that neither the Syrian people nor Turkey supporting Syria now agree on. From their perspective, they want to have control over all of Syria, including the northeastern part. And there are more talks coming from the SDF talking about the willingness to have a ceasefire and an agreement in more parts of the northeastern part in Syria now. SDF forces are handing in their weapons. They've already raised all of the new flags of Syria, and there are more talks about other locations falling under the new government influence in northeast Syria. And again, the approach is there's no problem with the Kurds. Kurds need to be part of the country. We're all the same when it comes to Syria and Syrian people, but there are problems with the armed groups that are fighting side by side with the United States. And then again, that puts them at direct odds with Turkey, who is directly backing, including by arms and weapons and intel and everything, the Syrian National Army and HTS when it comes to Syria. There have been many attacks, and Turkey even had airstrikes in the northeastern parts. Alongside, from the other side, the United States had other strikes too, and they previously sent warnings to Turkey and the SNA. And that's why, well, the United States is feeling, okay, Turkey is an ally, and they are a NATO member, but the fact that they are an ally and a NATO member doesn't give them the excuse to go so much against our interests inside of Syria. And again, this highlights the US hypocrisy. They openly declare that, for example, the PKK and YPG are terrorist organizations inside of Syria, yet they support them under the excuse of ISIS or fighting ISIS. And don't be surprised if they start releasing ISIS prisoners, by the way, and having more problems inside of Syria. Now, although the United States is trying to, well, have some sort of a deal where, no, the SDF will have an autonomy inside of Syria, and the US will remain there completely, Turkey, again, and the Syrians, they're not happy with that, and they want to take full control. And again, from the ground, there is more positive approach coming from the Syrian population in northeast Syria to have a United state in Syria, everyone living in it perfectly, and they continue from there. They don't want to be a separate entity. From their perspective, they got rid of the Assad government, and now they would be happily participate in a new united democratic Syria. Okay, how does Israel view that? Well, Israel views that as a big problem. From an Israeli perspective, they are, of course, using the vacuum, expanding from the south. The tensions are rising between them and Turkey when it comes to their illegal invasions inside of Syrian territories and their unprecedented strikes all across of Syria, destroying, in effect, well, the already worn out army of Bashar al-Assad. But again, these things belong to the Syrian people, and the fact that they are targeting Syria, that means they're targeting a sovereign entity, right? But Israel is doing that now because Syria is at its weakest point, and they do not want Syria to be established, and they want to jeopardize as much as possible and for as long as possible the prospect of Syria having its independence, its sovereignty, and having relations with countries. And they constantly want to have this campaign, the scare campaign when it comes to Syria. Israeli media always calls the new Syrian government that they're terrorists, that they are Al-Qaeda, despite the fact that they've changed their names or detached completely from Al-Qaeda before, or some of them. And then you have the comments coming from the senior figures, comments coming from the prime minister, and even people in the opposition of Israel. No one is willing to accept the fact that we have a normal state next to us. No, these are massive terrorists, and it's dangerous to be with them, and it doesn't matter what type of statements they have. We need to be very careful. And that's the big problem that's causing is, well, firstly, you're going against what's happening inside of Syria. At the end of the day, there's a transition government. They're looking to build a new government. They're looking to have elections soon, a constitution, get all of the aid in that they need to rebuild the country, return all of the refugees, millions of Syrians. And there are talks now about 1 million Syrians coming back up until January. These are massive numbers. And again, these numbers are people. Well, in some Western countries, they complain about refugees. And again, they always ignored the cause of the refugees, especially when it comes to countries that are facing lots of turmoil. If you have countries in West Asia and other parts of the world that are established, settled with good economic situations, and people get everything that they want, no foreign interference like what many Western countries do in the region, well, you wouldn't have many people who are refugees. So these things are very important. But Israel is worried about this campaign from Turkey against the PKK. Yair Golani was a previous top figure in the Israeli army, now opposition, saying Israel must be concerned about one fundamental thing: a Turkish attack on the Kurds in Syria. Again, the terminology, don't mind the terminology when it comes to Israel. They are colonialists and racists. They always use terminology to try and divide people. Turkey is not attacking the Kurds. Turkey is attacking the YPG and SDF. If the Turks subdue the Kurds, it will mean that instead of Iran and radical Shiite Islam, again, terminology, we will have Turkey and radical Sunni Islam. Israel must take the initiative and exploit and overt and covert channels to support the Kurds. A strong Kurdish space is security for Israel. Israel is being more clear about its support for the SDF and YPG and PKK. And again, that puts them side by side with the United States and at odds directly with Turkey, right? And the think tanks that were publishing these articles previously, they're also saying that, well, Turkey is creating a hub for HTS in essence, and also Hamas, because they're supporting these two groups in Syria. Although the transition government is asking every armed group inside of Syria, including HTS and the SNA who have been in Aleppo or in Damascus as well, to that said, disarm and hand their weapons to the Ministry of Defense so that they can start working on establishing a Ministry of Defense and an army, an official position. But that doesn't sit well when it comes to Israel. Israel does not like that. They want chaos inside of Syria, both them and the United States of America. Now, that, of course, is not in the favor of the Syrian people. What would be good for the Syrian people is for them to, well, we've had this campaign, deterrence of aggression, with hardly any bloodshed. And now they're looking to have a transition government that would lead them to have a constitution, more stability, working on rebuilding the country, getting the Syrians abroad to their homeland, and focusing on building. But that does not sit well with Israel. Israel is trying to exploit as much as possible, and they will continue to do so up until Syria will be in a position where they can have at least a defense pact when it comes to Turkey. Because the Turkish defense minister yesterday, he said that, yeah, we're open to support Syria militarily if they ask this from us. The new Syrian leader, he said that we're open for strategic ties and we're looking to have defense pacts as soon as possible. Again, it would most likely be with Turkey initially. And when you talk about a defense pact with Turkey, that means that's it. Turkey is very well established in supporting Syria and the Syrian people. And that's something that Israel is very worried about. From their perspective, they've replaced a previous threat, right, when it comes to Iran, with a new threat called Turkey. And it's not as if they have the best relationships with Turkey now. The tensions are rising between them and Turkey. The Turkish president previously warned them from a possibility of invasion, like we invaded Nagorno-Karabakh. He said we can invade you as well. So from an Israeli perspective, that does not sit well with them. However, it's rapidly expanding the situation in the northeast, and Turkey is looking to have a decisive blow by supporting the SNA to enforce a new reality in the northeast that would be backed by the majority of the population as well, have an agreement with the central government, and that's it. Look on a unified Syria and deal with the external threats and start rebuilding and focusing on the people of Syria. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this video, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace.